Thank you so much. Welcome to this public consultation regarding the Independent Street Checks Review. My name is Kika Ojo. I'm going to be your facilitator tonight. I'm going to kick us off. So again, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We hope that you've had a good chance to kind of catch up with some people in the room. It's nice to see such a full and robust and dynamic room full of people. This is great. Thanks for coming. I want to acknowledge the elders in the room, and if there are any youth in the room, I want to acknowledge the youth as well. Before I introduce Justice Tulloch, and he will provide you with some deeper context, this is just to say that this is an independent review of street checks regulation, and as such, it means that Justice Tulloch is not representing any particular government or any particular police service or affiliation. And so he will sort of go further into that as the evening goes on. After Justice Tulloch speaks, my colleague Danielle Dowdy will come up and share with you about our social media platforms, how this evening will go. I'll pop back up. You'll have an opportunity at your tables to discuss the questions that are on your tables already. So there's information on your tables. You'll have an opportunity to discuss those. You'll have a certain amount of time. I'll pop back up, and we'll go from table to table in terms of report backs. So that's sort of a little wee picture of how the evening will go. And at this time, without further ado, I'm going to ask Justice Tulloch to come up and welcome you. Thank you.
Great. I want to thank you, Kike, for your introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank to all of you for coming out. As you've heard, my name is Michael Tulloch, and I am a judge on the Court of Appeal for Ontario. I'm here in my capacity as an independent reviewer of the regulations regulating street checks. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we're on the land on which we gather is a traditional territory of a number of First Nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Atawan, Daron, as well as the Wendat peoples. Now, these territories are also covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, and today this area is home to the Chippewas of Thames First Nations, the Munsee of Delaware, and the Oneida Nations of the Thames. I also acknowledge and recognize the contributions of the Métis and the Inuit peoples and other indigenous peoples who have made both in shaping and strengthening this community the place that it is. Now, by acknowledging this traditional territory, we're recognizing and respecting the first peoples of this country. And to me, it is important that we acknowledge and publicly make this recognition because of their presence and contributions both in the past and the present. However, we must also recognize that acknowledging the traditional territory of these lands is only the beginning of any really meaningful reconciliation. Now, I'm here this evening, as I've indicated, as an independent reviewer of the new regulations passed by the Ontario government in 2016. It was put in place to regulate the police practice of street checks, and more specifically, the practice colloquially known as carding. And the intent of this regulation was to limit or ban the arbitrary interaction of some police officers with members of the public for the sole purpose of collecting their personal identifying information. I am an independent reviewer, which means that my position is independent of the government as well as independent of the police. Now, as indicated, I was asked by the Ontario government to conduct this independent review, and this was back in June of 2017. In my capacity as a reviewer, I will be reviewing the content of the regulation to see whether it reflects the important goal of ensuring bias-free police community interactions, as well that police and public interactions are consistent and conducted in a way that promotes public trust and confidence, while at the same time respecting individual rights and civil liberties. I will also be reviewing the regulation with a view to determine whether or not police services, the chiefs of police, as well as police services boards, are in compliance with the terms of the regulation. I will be conducting a very comprehensive review of the regulation, and in order to do this, I've assembled a team of experts with me, some of whom are here, and you will see them with name tags as you participate in this process this evening. Now, since September, we have been engaged in a very extensive consultation process throughout the province, and now we have embarked on the last series of consultations, which are the public consultations. And today's consultation in London is our 10th, and we have 2 more. Next week we will be in Ottawa and in Sudbury, and that will complete the public consultation phase of the review. Now, within this process, I intend to draw on what I've learned from these consultations to formulate a report with recommendations on the regulation. This report will be submitted to the government on November 30th, 2018, and it will be made available to the public sometime later, but definitely before January the 1st of 2019. Now, by way of background, the regulation is intended to govern the police and public interaction. That's the overall intent. And more specifically, when police is seeking to obtain a person's identifying information in situations where illegal statutory law, such as the Highway Traffic Act or the Trespass to Property Act, does not obligate the citizen to give the police his or her personal information. So just to sort of break that down for you, in situations where you're stopped by the police in a Traffic Act incident where the police stops you pursuant to the Highway Traffic Act, you are obliged to give your personal information, and we all are, right? Because that's what the law of Ontario says. Similarly, if you're on someone's property and you don't have their permission to be there, the Trespass to Property Act also kicks in, and that obliges you, if the police ask you for your identification, to give it to them. That's not what this regulation is about. The regulation is about situations where individuals are going about their business in a legal way, not doing anything, but then the police wants to know who they are. There may be some suspicious type circumstances that gives rise to the questioning by the police. Well, the regulation kicks in, and the police has to be compliant with the terms of the regulation. Now, under those, the regulation outlines what an officer must do if they ask for your identification. The regulation is not intended to stop the police from speaking with the public or the public from speaking with the police. And I think that we can all agree that there are situations where you want the public and the police to speak to each other, right? So it's not the intent to inhibit the police from speaking to the public, but it's the intent to stop arbitrary interactions between the police and the public, where people feel that they're being accused or identified in a way that breaches their own personal rights. The regulation is intended to stop the police from randomly and arbitrarily collecting personal information from members of the public who they speak with. The regulation also provides information and guidelines on the storage of information that comes from street checks, as well as it provides the mandatory training for all police officers on the new rules, the development of policies and procedures by police services and police services boards, as well as the public reporting requirements by the police services. With that background in mind, I look forward to this evening. I want to thank you guys all again for coming out and for having this conversation with us. I can assure you that at the end of this process, whatever your comments are, whatever your thoughtful recommendations are, will be reflected, and I will certainly consider them very carefully in the ultimate report that we will be writing. Okay, so thanks again.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Bonjour à tous. J'ai une petite annonce avant qu'on commence. Si vous voulez écouter en français, on a un service d'interprétation. Alors, veuillez vous munir des écouteurs à l'arrière de la salle, à côté de notre interprète violin. So welcome, folks. That was just a quick announcement that if you would like to listen to our program this evening in French, we've got a French interpreter, and there's headphones at the back of the room. So I'm just going to go through what this evening's about really quickly, provide you some logistics, and then we'll get started. So as Justice Tulloch mentioned, we have been traveling the province, and we'll be having 12 meetings. Tonight's our 10th meeting, and it's been a really informative and a great process. Part of our consultation with the public also includes a community survey. So if you go on our website, which is www.streetchecksreview.ca, you'll see a pop-up asking you or prompting you to take our survey. If you have time, we really encourage you to do that, because that's also a form of the data collection that we'll be analyzing. So the point of our public consultations really is to hear from you, the public. We want to know what your experiences are, what you've been hearing, what your recommendations are to improve the regulation, what's the impact been on you and on communities. And so you'll see at your table, there's various documents there, and we're going to ask you to just work through the documents and answer some of the questions, and that'll help us get a good understanding of what the public is feeling. As a disclaimer, we do not have the ability to actually resolve individual cases. So if you do have a story to tell or an experience that you've had, we would love to hear it, because that helps us inform our report writing and how we formulate our recommendations. But we're not here to actually resolve a case for you. So there are mechanisms to be able to do that, but unfortunately, we're not the body for that. And so, this evening's agenda, this introduction, a few minutes, and then we're going to get right into the roundtable discussion. And so, as I mentioned, you'll see an engagement guide on the table and also questions. We're going to ask you to work through those questions. There's a pad of paper and also pens. We ask that you appoint somebody at your table to take notes and to capture all of the discussions and the dialogue. And we'll do that for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then after that, we're going to do a report back. So we're going to call on each table, if you can identify a person to present their table's views. We're going to ask you to just do a report back, and Justice Tulloch will be up here at the front of the room taking notes on everything that folks are saying, and my colleague Kika will facilitate that discussion. And just so you know, we are on social media. We are tweeting and posting under the hashtag StreetChecks. So please feel free to tag us in a post or to even follow the hashtag to see what's being said or what we're saying. You'll see we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram. In terms of Facebook, this is on Facebook Live right now. So the cameraman is Dylan at the back of the room there. He's filming this. If you do not want to appear on camera, that's where the camera is. And I ask that, turn your back to the camera so you don't appear there. You'll also see myself or my colleagues taking photos. It's for our social media accounts. That's where the photos go. So if you're curious, you see somebody taking your picture. If you don't want your photo taken, not an issue. Just let us know if you see us with our phones up, and we'll put them down right away. But if you want to see where the photos are, you can go to any one of our social media accounts. And again, our website, streetchecksreview.ca, you'll be able to get all the information about this consultation and about our process and the review and where we're going to be next. And if there's something that you wanted to share with us that you didn't quite get to share, but maybe in a couple of weeks you want to gather your thoughts and send something in, you can always send us an email at info@streetchecksreview.ca. We're accepting emails from the public up until May the 31st. So you do have some time if you reflect on the evening and have other things that you would like to share. And that's it. Thank you so much. Okay, I was told that we're going to go right until 7:30, and there's still a lot of food. So if you want seconds, the dessert is there and everything. Be sure to help yourself. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. If you would, take your seat again. Where's my Dave? Oh, Dave's here. Dave, do you have a microphone? Okay. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your engagement. As you could hear by the energy in the room, conversations were pretty dynamic. Yes, and that's what we want. So the thing about it is, we can only know what you tell us, if that makes sense, right? As Justice Tulloch told you, this is meeting number 10 in terms of public consultations. Although Justice Tulloch and different members of the team have done other meetings in addition in these various cities. We've had separate meetings, for example, with police services, separate meetings with subsets of the community, so youth, for example. We've had an Indigenous focus, for example. So Justice Tulloch has really spent a lot of time engaging the community. And I would just underscore that this is your opportunity to make sure that he hears what you are thinking, right? He can't assume it. We can't assume it as a team. You have to tell us, okay? So how we're going to do this is, because there's so many people here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, threes, yeah. Each table will have between 3 and 4 minutes. I usually give a 30-second yellow card, what I call the yellow card. So you'll hear me say yellow card. That means start to think about wrapping up. Think about highlighting the things that haven't been said in particular. What else? Yeah, and just, respect each other's having the floor. So Dave, my colleague, who is standing there, will come around with a microphone from table to table, and that will be your table's opportunity. Hopefully you've chosen a reporter. Your table's opportunity to speak. Everybody's looking at each other now. Who are we going to volunteer, right? But it looks like Dave has selected table number 1. So, hold on. Are you drawing straws? What's happening? Okay. So a table has been selected, and if I could ask for your attention that while the person that's speaking is speaking, that the rest of us are not, that would be wonderful. Just helps us here as a team. Thank you so much. You have the floor.
Okay, so we were actually speaking just a minute ago in regards to the behavior of police officers. And what I suggested is that although the officers should have the training to be neutral or be compassionate, sometimes it's great to find out from them what it is that they would like to have happen or how they see situations in society. The other thing is that it's important that each individual have a neutral feeling towards these officers. We should not have a preconceived idea that they're all not compatible with whatever their job is and whatever society is. We should think of them as human beings. They have a job to do, and we should have respect for the officers on duty or off duty, or to society itself. What I said, because Nelson Mandela says, if you want to see, or the change that you want to see, you have to begin with that change. And I mean, it's probably sounds like fairy tale-ish, but I mean, it is a step forward for us to adapt a neutral way of thinking and giving the benefit of the doubt to the officers.
You all have more time, so if there's more people at your table that have something to say, that would be great. Thank you.
So at our table, someone said that the number of carding situations that happen have significantly decreased. So question that some of us had, because some people were impressed by those numbers, but what does that actually mean? And so the concern is just that you're told you can't do it. Does that mean that the behavior and the beliefs behind what might have motivated it in the first place, has that changed? So I was really, I'll be honest, I was really struggling with that at our table, because I know what stats and numbers can do, and until we start pulling them apart, it's just sort of window dressing.
I just want to reemphasize a point that was made earlier by Justice Tulloch, and it's in your documentation, that carding, that the actual street check thing, like the actual carding moment, happens when your identifying information is requested, so your name, et cetera. So other police interactions, right, as long as that is left out, don't get to be counted as such. Does that make sense? Is this clearing it up for people? All right, so that's the distinction, right? So you can go ahead.
Yeah, so that was just one of the points that I really wanted to stress, was that we wanted to, what training? Another question came up is, how do we at the front end start to screen differently so that we do have, we talked about policing is different. There's different expectations. So what screening is happening then? What training is being put in place? So when we're saying there's a significant reduction, well, let's pull that apart and let's dissect that to see what truly is happening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks. Another table? Oh. Sorry, okay, I wasn't sure if their hands were going. Okay, thanks. Another table?
They're ready.
Thank you.
Okay, so our table talked a lot about sort of the logistics of the data collection. So I just wanted to highlight some of the conversations we had around that. As a group, we didn't exactly know what the data that was collected during these stops were used for. I guess we knew that it would come up in future cases when individuals were, put on trial or stuff like that, and then so that kind of stuff would be part of their record. But we don't know as a group sort of like the specifics about that kind of stuff. One of the questions on here, number 17, was should police services be able to store this information? If yes, for how long? So again, we just wanted to sort of know like what the specifics surrounding storing that information would be. How is it being stored? Is it secure the way it's being stored? That sort of stuff. Our table actually had a bit of a disagreement over how long we think that the information should be stored. Some of us felt that 5 years was an appropriate time to store that information, because that was the amount of time that it would take for somebody to apply for having their record cleared, we thought, and then other people thought that even that was too long, and that really that's sort of information that gets collected at carding stuff in terms of, say, if an individual had a bad attitude or stuff like that. We thought that some other people at the table thought that 2 years would be sort of the longest that should be kept for. What else do we have in here? So Further on, the question 19 was, in your view, what information should be included in these reports to the public? So we had a couple stuff. We wanted to know the reasoning, in the words of the police officer who made the stop, what the reasons for the stop were. We wanted to know more about the demographics of, so it says that there is demographics put on the reports, but we want to know like the specific aspects of the demographics that's going to be on the report. You know, does it include race? Does it include socioeconomic status? Does it include the area that they were stopped, the area that that person lives in, that sort of stuff. Another thing that we really wanted to know was if the stop actually led to any further action. So if the individual who was stopped later on, if they got investigated for something, or if there was a charge that was brought against them. We thought that would be interesting because it would sort of show if there's any, if there's any benefits to the stopping, to the carding. So, you know, if there was a bunch of cardings and it turned out that every single one of them ended up with an investigation and a legitimate charge that came about that, then that would have a much different implication than if none of the individuals ever had a further charge brought against them. Anyone else? We have some other stuff.
So just going off what he was saying, we also talked about the type of data that is being stored. So we wanted to know that, so if you had a disagreement with an officer, is that's what being stored, or is it actually something that's pertinent to another case? So if you were physical with the officer, obviously that should be taken down. But if you were like talking back, we don't think that that should be on your record for like 5 years, because like a person can change in that time, and it's not pertinent to like the next situation. So if an officer came in to contact with somebody. Is anybody else? No? I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we basically based our points according to our class. So our prof right there, Leslie Beekos. Yeah. So basically, as a table, what we said is that the regulation is a good start, but work still needs to be done. So we did say that there was a systemic racism within the police force. So in 2014, there was a total of 8,400 cardings, and now in 2017, there's only 10. So we do see an improvement. Something we did say we needed to improve was more education to the citizens. So we wouldn't have known about this if it wasn't for the class. So I think if more people know about this, more people would be more informed. And one more thing I think is changing within the police force. Obviously, that is very difficult to do. But I think something we do need to do is being held more accountable, like punishment. Because we do think police officers know about the systemic racism within, but there is a code of silence. Mm-hmm. So that is something we don't really talk about. But another thing about the annual reports, we thought that the age, race, sex, reason, and demographic of the crime should be included on those. And lastly, our table kind of came up with a quote, which says, the statistics from a few years ago showed visible minorities are carded at much higher rates, even though the number of cards issued dropped dramatically after the implementation of the new regulations in 2017. It clearly shows that the systemic racism exists in the London police forces. The new regulations have regulated racism, but racism shouldn't exist within police forces. So carding is a symptom of racism.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'd like to start by saying we did have 3 more people here, but I think we scared them away before we gave the report, so we can say whatever we darn well please. First of all, I'd start by saying that none of us had been personally affected by street checks or carding, so we're speaking from people not directly affected by it in the past or in the past year. And one of the thoughtful things that were said at our place is that we're in the midst of a process. And I think we have to realize that it's going to be a process for some time and changing over some period of time. And that's an important thing for us to figure out, that we're still on a journey to get where we hope to be. And one of those journeys we talked about a lot was what happens beyond, and I think this has been touched on briefly, that there's a lot here that we're talking about is about a communication and a relationship between police and the community they serve. And points were raised that sometimes we only hear about the bad incidents that happen. Of the 100 encounters, maybe there are 1 or 2 bad ones. We hear about those, they make the media, and those are the ones everyone hangs their hat on, but we don't hear about the other 98 encounters. But who's supposed to tell about those? Because if police do it, it seems very self-serving. With respect to my media colleagues who are here, maybe it doesn't make great 6 o'clock news or headlines to talk about the positive encounters that happen. And so one of the members of our table, who is a community outreach worker, social worker, said perhaps it's up to the community to start telling some of those more positive stories and making them public so that that relationship is built and we break down those racial barriers and boundaries so that police and the citizens don't go into a communication, into an interaction, each with stereotypical views of each other. The final point that we wanted to make is we talked about the training, and I have to admit that I raised that issue. I'm on the police board in London. I was able to participate in the training, the mandatory training that was done and developed. And to me, it was one of the unexpected benefits in all this. Most of the time was spent talking about anti-racism, how to have positive communications, how to deal with those kinds of things, check your biases, recognize you have them. And I think it was a great benefit, but that each community, Thunder Bay, Ottawa, whatever, Toronto, London, probably has their own needs when it comes to training of police, and that each one should have some further training that's tailored to their own specific needs in that community. And I think those are all the things we have to add to the other ones that have already spoken.
Awesome. Thank you very much. You're making your way up. You want to be different, Dave, and come all the way to the top? Okay, never mind.
I'm making an easy flow to the front.
All right. Thanks.
So our group worked through all of the questions, and we spoke a lot about what everyone else has mentioned. We really touched on how important it is for the community to know what's going on, and the community relationship between the police and the citizens. And so we were talking about training for the police and how it would be very important for them to have the language necessary to communicate properly with citizens. We spoke about the citizens' perception of this idea of street carting because our table doesn't have much knowledge on it aside from course content, or like no one has had much experience with anything. So we based things on our perceptions and kind of what the public thinks. So it's kind of a scary thought. So police should have more training and make sure the communication is there to open a dialogue between the police and the community. We also touched on youth and racial minorities and other minorities in the community. So youth should be educated on their rights because we think not many citizens know about their rights. And youth, really, it would be very beneficial for them to have the education, especially youth in racialized minorities, to know about what to do when this happens and to know about what to do whenever you encounter a police officer. So we were talking about information sessions and how they should really be brought to the communities that will probably need the information more. Majority of our table is white, and we spoke about how this probably won't be a problem for a lot of us. So it might not be as necessary for us to have the information that other communities and groups do need. And we spoke about the data being collected and kind of mentioned how long it should be collected for or kept. We mentioned statute of limitations. So if there is a reason why someone is questioned and it is related to a crime, the data should maybe be held for as long as necessary or as long as possible for someone to be charged or for someone to be involved with something. But other than that, that was a very, very hard question. We spoke about the benefits of this happening, and we weren't really sure if there was a lot of benefits because if an officer has just cause to approach someone or ask them, then they have that. So what other reason would you need to talk to someone? So it would be really interesting to kind of explore or to be educated on what else does the police need to know about us. And yeah, we were mainly just very concerned and focusing on the community and how it'll affect the community and how it would be very, very important for the police to have a more community approach and dialogue with everyone.
Thank you. Dave?
Thanks.
Dave, right here, please.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, and fellow invitees here. I don't take any great pleasure in coming here today, but I'm going to be the canary in the mine, so to speak. In the case of carding, we have a before, a during, and an after. And what I wanted to discuss at this point is what happens after. In the case of the City of London Police Force, what they're proposing is to have a system in place where if you are carded and you want to know the reason why, you have to make a Freedom of Information request to get that information. So for your edification tonight, I mind you, this is not the Police of London. This is another police force. This is what a redacted document looks like. This is what happens when you ask for a Freedom of Information request, and the police, which can serve as a gatekeeper, decides that they don't want to give you that information. So this is one of the concerns that we have with regards to the power that we give to the police and the kind of discretionary means for them to decide what you should know and what you shouldn't know when it comes to being carded. And if anybody wants to see this after the presentation, I'll be more than happy to stick around and tell you more about this. Thank you.
Is there more at your table in terms of comments? No. Okay, thank you so much. Dave, where are you? Thank you. Can we go here? Thank you. He's not watching me. He's not doing his job. He should be.
We didn't even get through all the questions, but I'm going to highlight a few of the major points that I think the common themes that our table was talking about. I think the big one that we started off with was my table was talking about whether or not there really was any benefit to these interactions, regulated or not. And some people at our table were talking about not being convinced that the data is actually out there to support whether or not this is an effective use of police resources. Another really important theme that I don't think was mentioned yet was how important it is for the responsibility to be on the person with the uniform and with the use of force weapon to create an environment that is positive rather than expecting the person who is being asked questions to have to either invoke their rights or try to develop that positive rapport. It should be the other way around. The person with the uniform has the greater burden on them to create what I colloquially refer to as a better bedside manner, as I was trying to interpret what the table was saying. I think it was almost unanimous, or if not entirely unanimous, that having the written reason for the stop should be on the receipt, so not just verbal, but should be contain the receipt. Is that right? I think everyone agreed to that. And the gentleman raises a good point about what happens when it's not. So I think, full disclosure, I'm also on the Police Services Board with Jeanette, so I'll certainly be taking that back to the board. And I would encourage anybody who wants to provide that kind of feedback to provide that to the London Police Services Board. There's actually 2 openings. Sorry, I'm going to put a plug. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There's 2 openings on the board right now. I would really encourage anybody who wants to be part of that process to apply. Okay, that's done my plug. Sorry. Yeah, there was a lot of concerns about how vague the regulations are as well in terms of when the stops are being made, what instances they're not supposed to, they don't apply, when instances that they do apply. And the other big one that we talked about was this feeling that there's a big loophole, which is, as you pointed out, if you don't ask for identifying information, you don't have to record the stop. So we are bouncing around some ideas. Maybe a receipt should be issued in those cases anyway, anyway. And another idea was anytime there's any interaction, the police should have a positive obligation to hand over business cards, so at least the person has a record of who they were talking to if they have any concerns about that. Am I missing anything, guys? ID.
You can take the mic.
Like somebody, sorry. Somebody earlier mentioned that like there's been a decrease of carding in London.
Can we just turn up her mic,
sorry.
please? Thanks.
And but that does not mean that they're not stopping people just for chats. So we just want people to know, like, just information out to people that if they stop you and they don't ask you for IDs, they can have to record it. You don't have to talk to them. Yeah. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Table. And oh, all right. This laptop. Thank you.
So we kind of just went down the list of questions that we have. In terms of street checks, carding, general questions, for question number 1, have you heard about street checks and carding? Most of us on this table knew, some of us did not know what it meant or that it actually existed. In terms of the meaning as what it means to us, there's a range of responses from targeting special or certain populations, looking for criminal elements, to being essentially racist and a violation of constitutional rights, to police stopping oppressed people at random without a significant reason for the stop. And the last one that we had was that it's actually a police tactic, theoretically helpful for intelligence gathering, but we also recognize that individual biases tend to kind of dilute the process. For the question number 4, which talked about members of the public know enough about the regulation, it was clear that there's not enough information out there about the regulation itself. So how we can make it a little bit more available, we talked, there was very good, solid recommendation in terms of going straight through to the community, and especially physical spaces like the London Health Intercommunity Health Center. So connecting with people who don't necessarily know their rights in the first place and just informing them more about it. Speaking with advocates, connecting with people who, for example, support the low-income population, and the fact that speakers need to be used not just for, I mean, and I know we had a very positive comment around how London Police Service has a very strong social media presence. So we thought, it'll be a good place to use it. Having said that, we also need to have people who will go in and actually have face-to-face interactions and conversations with groups like seniors, like youth, like newcomers, who, and again, in terms of having that kind of sharing of information on a more open and a more accessible basis. In terms of police stops, so we the question do you think that the street checks and carding have any benefits? So there was, again, a bit of a yes and no. There was definitely seen as that there is a benefit, especially if there is a likelihood of criminality. So again, theoretically, it seems like a feasible process, but in reality, it is absolutely fraught with challenges. We had talked about should the police actually even stop people? And there was a kind of a resounding yes. So the idea was that community policing is a must. Yes, police needs to get out of their cars. Police officers need to be maintaining that contact, initiating that contact. But again, it's the approach and how they're going to do it, of course, is going to be a big piece. We did have one individual responding to question number 8, which was, have you been stopped by the police in the last year? We had one individual on the table who shared their experience in terms of, yes, they were waiting at the bus stop and they were asked, come over here, made that kind of gesture by a police officer in their vehicle. The person approaches them and they're asked to identify themselves. The individual responded by saying, I don't think, why do I need to? And there was a kind of an insistent intimidation in terms of, no, we need to see your ID now. And once the ID was provided, the person is given a response, okay, all right, well, you're not it. And upon further kind of asking as to what is it that we were looking for? The comment was made that there was a robbery and a person who was wearing a red shirt was the suspect. Considering that the individual that we are referring to was sitting on a bus stop waiting for the bus, yeah, that sounded a little... I said I called bullshit, but that's all I can say.
It's not for the minutes.
And yes, and when asked about what do you believe the reason for the stop, the simple answer is because of the color of my skin. The person was not informed for the reason of the stop. They were just kind of informed after the fact. They were asked to provide ID without any indication that they did not have to do that, and they were not given any receipt at the end of the interaction. So when things like this are happening, absolutely, our numbers may not be as high as they were back in 2014, but that doesn't really mean that those kind of interactions are not really taking place. Coming into the receipt, the thoughts on the receipt kind of went from an absolute necessity to why do we really need it, but again, it was like all the time.
Saleha,
sorry, I know.
Yellow card.
Yellow card, oh great. So the question on approach was extremely important. Be proactive. This is a message for the policing services. Be proactive, focus on the customer service aspect. They should identify themselves. They should be letting you know why. The attitude, of course, is extremely significant. The receipt part, the language should be as simple as possible. And the fact is that whenever we talk about training, there is a need for a training which actually focuses on change of culture and change of attitude as well. And then the public education is an absolute must. In terms of the question number 15,
Is this your last one?
This is my last one.
Thank you.
Especially because it has to do with the data collection. So the recommendation that was on the table was we looked at the possibility of using of that information and keeping it for approximately 3 years, because we look at, roughly speaking, major crimes, human trafficking, drugs, etc. You may be looking for something for the information to be kept, but after that, the information, of course, needs to be deleted. The one interesting question that we did have was in terms of the demographics, who defines the race and ethnicity of the person, and how is that really going to be defined? Because, again, whoever is walking down the street, it becomes extremely personal and a very, very subjective perception of the officer in terms of identifying who the person is.
Thank you. Thank you, we did it. So just on behalf of myself and our team, thank you for a very engaging evening. The conversation sounded very engaged, and we're really happy about that. Your feedback has been wonderful. Justice Tulloch has been up here taking notes. He will have the last word. The team has also been paying attention, and and of course it's been recorded for the purposes of review towards the development of the actual review by Justice Tulloch. So from me to you, thank you. And I'm just going to invite Justice Tulloch to have the last word. Thank you.
Okay, again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out. I saw a lot of students here from the University of Western Ontario. Your presence is well appreciated, and I want to commend your professor who insisted that you guys come to engage in this conversation. I think this is critically important, right? And, it's an important discussion, and, your voice should be heard on it. And as I've indicated at the outset, it's what I hear in these types of meetings that will be reflective in the ultimate report that I put together. And so your voices and your opinions and your thoughts, I should say thoughtfulness, is very, very valued from our perspective. And so, again, I just want to reiterate what Kike has said and thank each and every one of you for engaging and participating in this process. It's critically important. I think that London is a very important city, not only in Ontario, but certainly in Canada. And, you represented your city extremely well tonight by coming out here and engage in being responsible citizens and bringing forth some very thoughtful and insightful comments on the issue. It's not a black and white issue per se, right? There are complexities to this issue, and your comments are reflective of that. And so, again, I want to thank each and every one of you, and I look forward to your continued dialogue on this issue. And at the end of the day, I hope that when the report is written, you will all read it and continue to be engaged in your community and in these issues. Thanks again.
Yeah.